Alright, today I'm going to show you guys how to properly do a burnout. Now, as you see here in this picture, the car is smoking its rear tires. In order to properly do a burnout and have a nice smoke show, as you see here, the car must be smoking its rear tires. If the car is smoking its front tires, it will come out subpar and it will not look cool. It will look rather embarrassing because your car is dragging the rear wheels and wanting to go forward, but we will cover that later. So, as you see here again in this picture, we have a car that's smoking the rear tires and most likely has a V8 inside of it. So, that is what you want. A rear wheel drive V8 muscle car. Alright, here in this picture, we have 3 pedals. Now, most of you probably don't know how to drive a stick shift, so let me educate you a little bit. The third pedal on the left, the far left, is called the clutch. The clutch controls the transmission and engine linkage, the connectivity. By pushing that far left pedal, you can disengage or engage the transmission with the engine. That is very crucial in doing burnouts properly, for that matter, in cars. It is almost necessary that a car have a third pedal in order to properly do a burnout. If your car is automatic, it will produce more stress on the transmission and engine because what's happening is the car is going at a certain speed and the transmission will want to shift to a second gear, and there will be an inadequate amount of power going to the rear wheels, and the car will downshift back to first, and it will continuously do that until you stop doing the burnout. So it is best that there is a third pedal, as I like to call the cool pedal, and yeah. Now, to go along with the third pedal, we have a shifter. We have, looks like a 5-speed, because you see 5 numbers, 5 gears, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and of course R being reverse. Now, when you do a burnout, the car has to be in first gear. You can do a burnout in second gear, but it's pointless. Because what happens is, in first gear you have the most torque, you have a short gear ratio, which means the engine will spool up faster in first gear, causing the most torque and the most amount of smoke, and you'll have a nice smoke show. So you want the car to be in first gear to produce a nice burnout. The next picture we have here is an RPM gauge or a tachometer. Now the tach reads 5,500 RPM out of 10,000 RPM. Your car does not need to have 10,000 RPMs to properly do a burnout. If your car is in the 6,000 and 7,000 range, which most cars are nowadays, all you need to do is have the RPMs in the majority of the power or in the proper power band. It's usually between the 3,000 and 5,000 RPM mark. So anywhere in there will be significant, will be sufficient. In this case here, it's 5,500, which is a little bit more than half. But all you really need to do is raise the tachometer to about 3,000 and 5,000 RPM. It never hurts to have more power to the engine, and that's to properly spin the tires. Because otherwise, what happens is you burn the clutch, and I will show you that afterward. So after you press the clutch, after you put the car in first gear, after you raise the tachometer to about 5,500 RPM, after that you release the clutch really quickly and you slam your left foot on the brake pedal while holding the throttle potentially down to the floor. So when you slam on the brake, what happens is, in a rear-wheel drive car, it locks the front because the power from the brakes, 80% of it comes from the front, 20% of it comes from the rear. That's where again, the majority of the brake power is. So if the car is rear-wheel drive, the brakes in the front are holding the car back while the rear tires are spinning. In a front-wheel drive car, you don't have that luxury. What happens is, if you do this method, you do a burnout in a front-wheel drive car, what happens is you have to pull the e-brake or emergency brake, and it locks the rear wheels from spinning. So while the front tires are spinning, while they're causing a burnout, the car, if it has enough power, it will start pulling the rear wheels with it. And the burnout won't last very long. In fact, the burnout will probably be non-existent because the car is pulling itself forward, which isn't good. So in a rear-wheel drive car, it's ideal to do this method and lock the front tires so then the rear tires can spin freely. Now, as explained earlier about burning the clutch, this is what happens. If you attempt to do a burnout and you don't raise the RPMs to an optimal level, you get the burn clutch effect. Now, as you see here, the smoke, instead of coming from the rear of the car where the rear tires are, it is coming from the middle of the car, which is where the transmission is located. This will burn the clutch. It is the worst smell you could possibly imagine out of a vehicle. It is not pleasant, and to car enthusiasts, it is painful to have this done. So what happens is, without raising the RPMs enough to break the rear wheels from the ground to start spinning, the rear wheels are in place, the engine is turning with the clutch engaged, and it's burning the engine with the transmission, and it's not spinning the rear wheels. Hence, you're burning the clutch, and it's not pretty. This is what it looks like. Let me show you an example.
That was test one.
That was not the tires.
That was not the tires. What was it? I don't know. I think that's the clutch. Was that the clutch? No, it's back here, dude. It's coming up from the other side in the back. Clutch is in the back. Fuck!
Okay, after we just watched that example, some of you might be confused on what just took place. Well, in the very beginning, you're supposed to raise the RPMs to 5,000 RPM before you let the clutch out. Before you disengage and engage the clutch, I have to again reiterate, it must be at a higher RPM. What that guy did was he let the clutch out at almost idle, about maybe 1,000, 2,000 RPM, and then after he engaged the clutch, he floored it and slammed on the brakes, but the rear wheels did not have enough torque to properly spin free. They did for that split second. I mean, he left a little patch of rubber in the very beginning, but that's all he did. And you saw the smoke rise from the middle of the car, because again, that's where the transmission is located, especially in a Corvette Z06. The transmissions are in the center. So as he's flooring it and redlining the engine, and you hear it, he's burning the clutch, because the engine and transmission are linked together, but they're not spinning the wheels. So that's what happened. Now let me show you how to properly do a burnout. Okay, now what happened in that video, as you see, is that was a Ford Mustang Cobra, which got about 390 horsepower. It is rear-wheel drive, as you saw, and what happened was he pulled up to a puddle of water. Now what happens with the water, again, some of you might be confused, is it helps break the tires free. I don't know if you've ever driven in rain. What happens when you floor it in rain, the tires break free naturally because it's slippery. Well, that's what happens. And the tires are able to break freely easier by entering water. Now you heard in this video where the guy, he revved the engine, he brought it up to a higher RPM, he released the clutch, and he slammed the brake. At the same time, the rear wheels, they broke free, and they caused a nice smoke show, as you saw. And mind you, he probably needs to replace those set of slicks that he just happened to burn. Well, not really though. But anyway, the point is, he did a burnout successfully. Hooray! Hooray, hip hip hooray. It's all nice and happy and good. So that is how you properly do a burnout. The other one was an example of how not to do a burnout. And that is all. And finally, here is a cute kitten for your pleasure. To end my presentation on how to properly do a burnout, I showed you an improper way to do a burnout, and I showed you the proper way to do a burnout. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask me. I will gladly answer your questions. My car is a 5-speed. It is unfortunately front-wheel drive, so doing burnouts in my car is extremely hard and embarrassing, so I just don't do it. But nonetheless, it is fun to squeal the tires every now and then and scare my girlfriend. So thank you, have a nice day, and I look forward to your responses and comments. Thank you.